Kendrick Shaw, executive assistant to the CEO, smirked as he glanced toward the janitor who was scrubbing scuff marks near the edge of the helipad. "I bet he couldn't even find the ignition," he said. Sloan Davenport, CEO of Davenport Industries, allowed a rare, tired smile. After a long day filled with brutal negotiations, even the smallest hint of humor felt like a relief. The janitor, a quiet, mid-30s, weary-eyed, remained completely absorbed in his work, as if the world around him didn't exist. "You think so?" Sloan asked, indulging Kendrick's amusement. "I'll bet $1,000 he doesn't know the first thing about her Bell 429, Kendrick whispered conspiratorially. "All right," Sloan said, her voice crisp against the rooftop wind. She walked toward the janitor. "You," she called. The man looked up, startled. She pointed toward her personal helicopter, its blades gleaming under the afternoon sun. "My assistant and I have a wager. If you can fly this helicopter a broken bar, I'll marry you." The janitor stared at her, then at the aircraft, his expression unreadable. Behind her, Kendrick snickered. The janitor wiped his hands on a rag, walked past them without a word, and opened the pilot's door. Sloan's smile faltered. She looked at Kendrick, whose amusement only grew. This was going to be a story for the bar. Watch the janitor press a few random switches and embarrass himself. But the janitor didn't fumble. His movements were smooth, efficient, practiced. He strapped himself in like someone who had repeated the action thousands of times. His hands glided across the controls with the confident precision of a surgeon. A series of switches flipped. The engine began to whine, a sound Sloan knew by heart. "What is he doing?" she whispered, alarm replacing her amusement. "He's bluffing," Kendrick muttered, though uncertainty crept into his voice. "He has to be." The turbine's whine sharpened, swelling into a deafening roar. The rotor blades began to spin slowly at first, then faster, until they blurred into a translucent disc. Wind whipped Sloan's hair across her face and forced Kendrick to stumble backward. This wasn't a bluff. Before Sloan could shout or stop him, the helicopter lifted clean, steady, flawless. No wobble, no hesitation. It rose 20 feet into the air and hovered with eerie stillness, as if suspended by invisible strings. Then the nose dipped and the aircraft executed a perfect pirouette, almost like a polite bow. Kendrick's jaw dropped. Sloan stood frozen, unable to reconcile the quiet man who mopped her hallways with the masterful pilot maneuvering her helicopter. The chopper banked sharply, cutting across the skyline before swooping back to the helipad. With the same uncanny grace, it descended and touched down so softly the landing skids barely whispered against the concrete. The engine wound down. Silence reclaimed the rooftop. The pilot's door opened. The janitor stepped out, closed it gently, picked up his spray bottle, and resumed scrubbing the floor without a single glance at them, as if nothing had happened at all. Sloan finally found her voice. "Who are you?" The janitor, Owen Grant, looked up. His eyes were calm, but something deep and impenetrable lingered behind them. "Just the janitor, ma'am." He gave a faint nod. "Have a good evening." Then he pushed his cart toward the exit. The wheels squeaked softly as the heavy steel door clicked shut behind him. Kendrick snapped out of his stupor. "That a broken bar? That was impossible." "Who is he? Did you know he could do that?" "No, Kendrick, I did not," Sloan said, her thoughts racing. She ran a multi-billion-dollar corporation and vetted every person who entered her building. She did not tolerate surprises, especially not ones with potential consequences. A man with the skills of an elite pilot was cleaning her floors, and she had absolutely no idea why. Her phone buzzed. A message from the chairman of the board. "Tokyo is getting cold feet. The deal is failing. Fix it." Sloan's jaw tightened. The Tanaka deal meant everything. It would secure their dominance for the next decade. Its failure would be disastrous, despite Kendrick's glowing reports claiming everything was on track. She looked at the helicopter, then at the door where Owen had vanished. Two crises had landed in her lap at once, and for the first time in years, she didn't know which one to face first. Back in her penthouse office, the echo of the helicopter still rang in her ears. "Get me everything we have on Grant," she ordered sharply. "Employee file, background check, security clearance, his coffee preferences, all of it." Kendrick hurried to his workstation and pulled up the file. A moment later, It appeared on the large wall monitor. It was almost empty. Owen Grant had been hired 8 months earlier. His application was minimal and addressed in a modest part of town. Previous work listed as self-employed in logistics and transport. No references. His background check was spotless. No criminal record. No credit problems. No red flags. He was a ghost. A model employee with perfect attendance and 0 complaints. And not a single mention of military service, flight training, or any link to aviation. "This is it?" Sloan asked, her voice dangerously calm. "This is all we have on a man capable of flying a $9 million aircraft, a broken bar like it's part of his own body. The agency we use is the best in the business," Kendrick protested. "If there were anything to find, they would have found it. Maybe he's just a hobbyist. Some guys are naturally talented." Sloan gave him a glare that could curdle milk. "A naturally talented doesn't explain a 0G pirouette 50 stories above downtown. He's a professional, and he's hiding. Find out why." She shifted back to the other fire, demanding her attention. "And while you're at it," she added, "explain why I'm getting panicked messages from the chairman about Tokyo when you told me yesterday Tanaka was basically signed." Kendrick's polished executive mask slid neatly back into place. He straightened his tie, adopting that perfectly measured mix of concern and calm confidence. "It's a minor snag, Sloan. A cultural misstep," he said smoothly. "Tanaka-san felt our final offer was a bit too aggressive. He prefers a softer approach. I'm already drafting a revised proposal as something that shows more deference. I've left a message with his chief of staff. I promise, it's under control." His explanation was polished, rational and deeply irritating. It made her feel like she was overreacting. Still, a knot tightened in her gut. "Under control," she repeated. "Kendrick, this is a $50 billion deal. We don't have minor snags, and we won't," he replied, voiced like a soothing balm. "Let me handle the Japanese side. You've got enough on your plate. I'll smooth it over. That's what you pay me for." She studied him for a long, silent beat, then gave a curt nod. "Fine. Handle it. But if I get one more message like that, the only thing you'll be handling is your severance package." Hours later, Owen Grant pushed open the door to his small apartment. The stale hallway air gave way to the comforting smell of cinnamon and warm laundry. "Daddy." A small girl with wide, curious eyes and a wild tangle of brown hair flew at him from the couch. Owen dropped his worn backpack and scooped her up. The tension in his shoulders melted instantly. "Hey, Firefly," he murmured into her hair. "How was your day with Mrs. Gable?" "It was okay," Maya said, pulling back with exaggerated seriousness. "We finished the volcano for my science project. I put extra baking soda for a mega explosion. But Mrs. Gable smells like mothballs." Owen laughed, a warm, unguarded sound no one at Davenport Industries would have recognized. "Let's not tell her that," he chuckled. "Did you finish your homework?" "All of it," she said proudly. "And I practiced my spelling words. Even a pterodactyl." "You're getting too smart for me," he said, setting her down. "Go wash up for dinner. I'm making the tacos you like." As she dashed away, Owen glanced around the small, meticulously tidy apartment. Every piece of furniture was second-hand but carefully maintained. Maya's bright drawings covered the walls, splashes of color against the building's dull beige. On a small, cluttered desk in the corner sat a framed photograph of a woman with a smile as radiant as Maya's, her arm looped around a younger, lighter Owen dressed in a flight suit. This was his entire world. Not skyscrapers, not boardrooms. A modest two-bedroom apartment where the only mission that mattered was keeping his daughter safe, happy, and far from the life he'd abandoned. Taking the helicopter had been a mistake, a stupid, reckless impulse. He dropped his guard for a few seconds. Now he could only hope the fallout wouldn't reach his front door. But deep down, he knew better. A woman like Sloan Davenport didn't just let things go. In her sleek, glass-walled office, Sloan stared out over the glittering city lights, her half-eaten salad forgotten on the desk. She couldn't shake the image of the janitor's hands on the control system. Sure, completely at home. She'd built an empire on her ability to read people, to dissect their motives and weaknesses in a single conversation. Owen Grant, however, was a locked door with no key. She'd had Kendrick check on her personal pilot, Gavin. The explanation was that Gavin's son had been rushed to the hospital with a sudden, severe bout of pneumonia. Plausible, but the timing was just a little too perfect. Another piece of a puzzle she couldn't see yet. Frustration gnawed at her. She packed her briefcase and headed to the private elevator. The workday was technically over, but the questions weren't. As she stepped out onto the street, her driver held the limo door open. That's when she saw him. Across the street, under the dim orange wash of a bus stoplight, stood Owen Grant. He wasn't watching traffic. He was staring down at his phone, a small, wistful smile on his face. Sloane paused, one hand on the car door. For a moment, she considered crossing the street and confronting him, demanding the truth. But what would she even say? Why are you lying about who you are? What right did she have to ask? A bus pulled up with a hiss of brakes. Owen slipped his phone into his pocket, stepped on board, and vanished into the blur of exhausted commuters. Sloane watched until the bus's red taillights disappeared around the corner. She slid into the back seat. Just drive, she said quietly. She had no destination in mind, but one thing was suddenly crystal clear: background checks and HR files weren't going to give her the answers she wanted. If she wanted to know who Owen Grant really was, she would have to dig herself. The next morning, Sloane arrived at the office with a sharpened resolve. The direct approach had failed. Official channels were useless. If she wanted to understand the mystery of Owen Grant, she needed a different strategy. Her opportunity was waiting in her inbox. Reminder: Davenport Day annual picnic this Saturday. Every year, the company hosted a massive mandatory fun event for employees and their families, a carefully staged show of community and goodwill. Sloane hated it. Normally, she made a brief appearance, shook a few hands, and escaped. This year, it was perfect. Neutral territory, a place where, for a few hours, a janitor and a CEO could just be people. She received Giesa for the entire day. "Good morning, Sloane," Kendrick said smoothly, gliding into her office with a tablet in hand. "I've got good news." "Go on," she replied. "I just had a promising preliminary call with Tanaka-san's number 2. I think I found a way to salvage the deal." He looked pleased with himself. Sloane raised an eyebrow. "Already?" "They felt we were undervaluing their proprietary distribution network," he explained. "So I drafted a memorandum of understanding that grants them a slightly larger stake in the joint venture's logistics arm. It'll trim our profit margin by a fraction of a percent in the short term, but it's a strong gesture of goodwill." The subtle approach they were looking for. "If you approve, I think we can get them back to the table by Monday." Sloane skimmed the document. On the surface, it looked reasonable, but something about it nagged at her. Logistics of the backbone of their global imperium wasn't a minor concession. It was a strategic pillar. Giving up even a sliver of control felt less like compromise and more like surrender. "This is a big move, Kendrick. It sets a risky precedent." "It's a bigger move to lose the entire deal," he countered smoothly. "This is a clean, decisive fix. Strength through flexibility." They'll read it as respect. The board's pressure was suffocating. Time was running out. Against her instincts, Sloane gave a curt nod. "Fine, send it. But if this blows up, it's on you." "Don't worry, Sloane," he said with that same confident smile. "I've got your back." Davenport Day arrived in a blur of forced happiness. The sprawling corporate park teemed with bouncy castles, food trucks, and employees trying to look relaxed under the watchful gaze of upper management. Sloane felt completely out of place in her tailored linen trousers and silk blouse. She found him near the small lake at the edge of the park. Owen wasn't clustered around the barbecue with the other maintenance staff. Instead, he sat on a checkered blanket beside his daughter, helping her carefully craft a tiny boat from a leaf and a twig. In a plain gray t-shirt and jeans, he looked different, younger, softer, but there was still that quiet alertness in his eyes. Sloane drew a steadying breath and walked toward them. "Grant." Owen looked up, and for a heartbeat, a flash of guarded hostility crossed his face before he forced it back into polite neutrality. "Ma'am," he said evenly. Sloane gestured awkwardly toward the little girl beside him. "Is this your daughter?" "This is Maya," Owen replied, resting a protective hand on her small shoulder. Maya examined Sloane with the blunt honesty only an 8-year-old could deliver. "Your face is really serious," she observed. "Are you mad about the grass?" Sloane blinked. "No, I'm not mad about the grass. Okay, Maya said, satisfied. She held up her tiny creation. Look, it's a boat, for the Frog King. Sloane nodded, feeling absurdly out of her depth. It's a broken bar, very structurally sound. Owen's mouth twitched to almost a smile. She's our chief naval architect. Silence fell between them, thick, heavy, and shaped by the unspoken power distance separating CEO and Janitor. Sloane was on the verge of retreating, ready to admit this was a terrible idea, when a sharp buzzing filled the air. One of the marketing VPs was showing off a top-end drone, performing dramatic dives and swoops over the lake. As it zipped past their blanket, Owen reacted instantly, a subtle but unmistakable. His spine straightened. His eyes tracked the drone with razor-focused precision, and not curiosity, but calculation. A faint flinch tightened his shoulders, the kind of reflex born from expecting a second sound to follow that mechanical buzz. In that moment, the gentle father vanished. What remained was someone colder, sharper, dangerous. Sloane saw everything, the mask slipping, the truth bleeding through. Then it was gone. The drone drifted away, and Owen forced himself back into ease, turning toward Maya with a stiff smile. "Daddy, can we get ice cream?" she asked, oblivious to the shift. "Sure, Firefly," he said, voice slightly too tight. He stood and looked at Sloane. "Excuse us, ma'am." Then he took Maya's hand and disappeared into the crowd. Sloane remained frozen, the drone's buzzing still echoing in her mind. That wasn't the reaction of a hobbyist, or even an amateur pilot. That was training, instinct, a muscle memory shaped in places where that sound meant danger. Across the lawn, Kendrick watched her stare after the Janitor. He saw the confusion, fascination, that flicker of respect she didn't even realize was on her face. He pulled out his phone and typed, "The CEO is distracted. Accelerate the timeline. Send the Q3 projections by Monday. The ones we discussed." He slipped the phone away, a predatory smile forming. Sloane thought she was unraveling a secret. She had no idea she was only a pawn in his plan. Monday morning hit hard. Sloane's office felt charged, the air thinner. Her mind kept circling the contradiction that was Owen Grant, the warm father crafting leaf boats, and the hardened soldier reacting to a toy drone like incoming fire. She hated puzzles she couldn't solve. Her thoughts snapped into focus as Kendrick swept into her office, wearing a mask of grave urgency. He held out a tablet filled with emails from Tokyo. "It's worse than I expected," he said. "Tanaka's board took our revised offer as weakness. They're calling it desperate." Sloane's stomach dropped. She grabbed the tablet, scanning the latest message. The respectful tone from last week was gone, replaced by a barrage of new demands: a bigger stake, lower acquisition price, even 2 seats on their North American board. This wasn't negotiation. It was humiliation. "They're gutting us," she whispered, "using our concession to squeeze us dry." "How did this happen?" Kendrick shook his head slowly. "I don't know. My contacts said it was the right strategy." It's almost like a broken bar. He hesitated, letting the implication hang in the air. "Like someone tipped him off that we were more desperate than we claimed." The sting hit immediately, a suggestion that she wasn't capable, that her leadership was faltering. 2 minutes later, the chairman called. His voice was ice. The board had called an emergency session for Friday. Fix the Tanaka deal or present another option. Fail, and they would revisit leadership. The threat was unmistakable. For the next hour, Sloane tore through the company like a force of nature. Her legal team, CFO, head of strategy, they all told her the same thing. They were trapped. Fight, and risk a hostile takeover. Fold, and destroy the company's future. There was no winning move. Drained, she walked to the window overlooking the helipad. The helicopter gleamed in the fading light, a symbol of power she suddenly felt slipping through her fingers. She thought of Oina, how he had handled that machine with effortless authority. He wasn't trapped. He was free. A wild, desperate idea took shape. It was insane, but it was the only forward move she had left. That night, she found him alone on the 48th floor, cleaning the glass walls of an empty conference room. The steady rhythm of the squeegee echoed through the space. "Grant," she said. He paused, turning toward her, not surprised, as though he'd been waiting. "I'm not here about your job," she said. "I'm here about your other one." "I only have one job." "Stop," she snapped. "I saw you at the picnic." She stepped closer. "My head of security is a former Marine." He flinches at car backfires. He flinched at a children's drone. That's not hobby experience. That's muscle memory, the kind built in places where a buzzing sound means someone is about to fire. His expression didn't change. She exhaled. "The Tanaka deal is collapsing, and there's one person who can turn it around. Kenji Ita, an old associate of my father's. If I can reach him, I can salvage everything, but he lives on a private island off British Columbia, only accessible by helicopter. Commercial flights are grounded." She paused. "My pilot is still out. His son is worse. I need someone who can fly through a storm unbroken, someone who doesn't exist on any official logs." She swallowed. "I need you." Owen quietly gathered his tools and walked toward the door. "You're mistaken, ma'am. I'm a janitor. I can't help you. Everyone has a price." Sloane pressed. "Not me," he said flatly. "What about your daughter?" He froze. When he turned, fire flickered behind his eyes. "Don't bring her into this." "I have to," Sloane admitted, hating herself as the words came. "I know you spend a third of your income on her medication. I know your insurance is close to its lifetime cap, and I know every breath she takes scares you." His face drained of color. The stoic mask cracked, revealing raw fear. "This isn't a request, Owen," she said softly. "It's an offer." She stepped closer. "One flight, get me to Ito and back. I'll set up a private irrevocable trust for Maya. It'll cover all her medical expenses for life, every treatment, every prescription, plus her full education at college through any graduate school she wants." She let the words settle. She was offering what his quiet life never could. Absolute safety for his child. He stood there, torn between the ghosts of his past and the future he wanted for Maya. His hands clenched until his knuckles went white. Finally, he spoke. His voice was flat, emotionless, the voice of a soldier agreeing to a mission. "Fine, I'll do it, but on my terms." Sloane steadied herself. "I'm listening. First, the trust is drafted by my lawyer, funded in full before takeoff. Second, this is a one-time transportation contract. You don't ask about my past, my training, or my family. I'm not your employee. I'm a contractor. Third, once we land, we go back to strangers. You don't know me. I don't know you. Understood?" "Understood," she said immediately. "We flight night," he said. "Storm hits hardest around 3. I want to be through it before then. Have the helicopter fueled. I need updated weather charts, satellite images, landing coordinates on a private, air-gapped tablet." In an instant, the janitor was gone. A commander stood in his place. Sloane could only nod. "I'll arrange everything." As he left to call his lawyer and set up care for Maya, Sloane felt a dizzy rush. She had handed her futuria, the company's futuria, to a man whose history she didn't know. Downstairs, Kendrick noticed a sudden flurry of activity. Encrypted emails, a midnight flight request, a helicopter being prepped. It didn't add up. Passing the janitor's closet, he spotted Owen quietly packing a small, military-style go bag. Kendrick slowed, eyes narrowing. That incident on the rooftop, a broken bar, maybe it wasn't a fluke. He dialed his contact at the airfield. "I need you watching the transponder for N429SD. he said. "Call me the moment it moves." Sloane received the aircraft's flight plan the moment it was filed, along with the listed pilot. An hour later, she met Owen on the rooftop. He had changed into dark utility cargo pants and a weathered leather jacket. Without acknowledging her, he headed straight for the helicopter. For the next 20 minutes, he circled the aircraft with a flashlight, inspecting rotors, fluid lines, and avionics with a level of precision bordering on obsessive. He seemed to step into a different world, a world of protocols, checklists, and absolute control. Finally, he gave a curt nod. "It'll fly." He gestured for the tablet, and she handed it over. After reviewing the weather patterns, his expression darkened. "It's going to get rough. Once you're in, you don't get out until I say. You follow every command without hesitation." "Clear, crystal, Sloane replied as she strapped into the co-pilot's seat. The takeoff was smoother yet more intense than before. No flare, no theatrics, only pure efficiency. The helicopter lifted into the stormy night, banking sharply as they headed northwest over the sprawling city. For nearly an hour, Neither of them spoke. The steady thrum of the rotors filled the cramped cockpit. City lights slowly faded into an endless stretch of darkness. Finally, Sloane broke the silence. "Why?" Owen didn't look away from the instruments. "We made a deal. No questions." "It's not about your past," she said quietly. "It's about your present. Why do this? Why work as a janitor when you can fly like this?" He paused for a long moment. "Because this gets people killed," he said in a low voice. "Pushing a mop doesn't." Before she could respond, the helicopter lurched violently. A wall of thick black clouds rose ahead, appearing out of nowhere. Rain slammed against the windshield. The aircraft dipped suddenly, and Sloane's stomach shot upward. Her hand tightened on the seat, her composure slipping. A small gasp escaped her. Owen's head snapped toward her. The cold, distant look in his eyes softened into something calmer, focused, protective. "Hey," he said, voice steady despite the storm roaring around them. "Look at me. You're okay. Just breathe. I've flown through worse." She met his eyes and saw absolute certainty there, unwavering amid the chaos. In that instant, he wasn't just a pilot, he was her lifeline. And somewhere between the shaking fuselage and the howling wind, she realized she trusted a man she barely knew with her life, her company, her future. The helicopter bucked again, dropping sharply. Warning alarms shrieked through the cockpit. Outside, everything was darkness and violent rain lit only by flashes of lightning. "Crosswinds are hitting 80 knots, Owen said, still impossibly calm. "They're trying to shove us into the mountain. I have to take us down and find stable air." He eased the cyclic forward into a controlled dive that felt anything but controlled. Rain hammered the glass, wind screaming around them. Sloane watched his hands move in a constant blur over the controls, each adjustment precise, purposeful. He wasn't simply flying, he was fighting the storm with every second. "There," he said at last, eyes darting between the instruments and the darkness outside. Below the sheer. "Hold on." He banked hard. Sloane was pushed deep into her seat as the helicopter tilted almost sideways before leveling out. The violent shaking eased. Alarms died down, and though the storm raged around them, the air was steadier. They had made it through the worst. Sloane exhaled shakily, only now aware she'd been holding her breath. "How did you do that?" "I fly the aircraft," he said without looking at her. "I don't fly the weather." 20 minutes later, a faint flicker appeared through the rain, a small rugged island battered by ocean winds. Owen circled once, scanning for hazards, then descended toward a windswept landing pad carved into the rock. He set the helicopter down with a soft, final thud. As the engine powered down, the sudden quiet felt almost unreal, broken only by wind and rain. "We're here," Owen said, his voice returning to its usual flat tone, the disciplined pilot fading, the contractor returning. An elderly man stood waiting with the lantern, a Cangiato. His weathered face carried decades of hard-won wisdom, his eyes sharp and perceptive. He led them into a modest but elegant home filled with books and a comforting scent of cedar. For a full hour, he listened to Sloane's proposal in silence, hands wrapped around a cup of hot tea. Sloane delivered flawless data, projections, and mutual benefits of restructuring the deal with Tanaka. It was brilliant business logic, and it wasn't working. "You speak of profits and margins, Miss Davenport," Ito finally said, his deep voice steady. "But these are temporary matters. My friend Tanaka values loyalty. He believes you have shown none. He believes your company has lost its spirit, its soul. Your numbers will not sway him." Sloane felt her stomach drop. After everything she'd endured to get here, it was collapsing around her. Desperation clawed at her confidence. Ito's gaze shifted to Owen, who stood silently near the door like a watchful shadow. "And you?" he asked. "You piloted her through that storm." "Yes, sir," Owen said simply. "You must have great faith in her plan to risk your life for it," Ito observed. Owen's jaw tightened. He glanced at Sloane, paled, defeated, then back at the old man. He knew he should stay silent. This wasn't his place. But something in Sloane's defeated expression tugged at Owen. It reminded him of Madia, her innocence, her future, the promise he still owed her. He had a debt life would never let him forget. "Sir," Owen said quietly, but his voice held steady. "I don't know a thing about her deal, but I've been in situations where the plan collapses in the first 5 minutes. When that happens, You don't trust the plan, you trust the person flying beside you. The room fell into a heavy silence. Ito studied Owen with a long, measuring stare. In that moment, he saw all three parts of the man standing before him: the janitor, the pilot, the soldier. Someone who understood truths deeper than profit margins on projections. Someone who saw the world through experience, not spreadsheets. Then Ito turned his gaze to Sloane. This time, he didn't see a ruthless executive. He saw a leader who had earned that kind of loyalty, that kind of belief, from a man who owed her nothing. A slow smile touched Ito's lips. "I understand," he said softly. He reached for an old rotary phone and dialed. "I will make the call." At Davenport Industries, Kendrick Shaw stalked across his office like a predator in a cage. His contact at the airfield had confirmed the absurd truth: the flight plan had been filed under a dead-end shell company, the pilot listed as John Doe, and the man who boarded the helicopter with Sloane was unthinkably the janitor. Sloane's insane gamble might actually succeed. Kendrick wouldn't allow that. Not now. Not after everything he had set into motion. He lifted his phone. "It's me," he murmured when the line connected. "She's gone rogue. Unauthorized trip. Off the record. We move now. Frame it as a mental health crisis. Stress-induced breakdown. Leak her flight details to the board. I want an emergency vote at 8 a.m. tomorrow. She's out." Relief hit Sloane like a rush of oxygen as the helicopter rose from the island. Ito had made a call. Tanaka agreed to halt retaliation and reopen negotiations. She'd done it. She had saved the company. "Thank you, Owen," she told him, genuine gratitude warming her voice. "I couldn't have ya." Her phone buzzed sharply, the satellite signal barely catching. A single email slipped through. Subject: Mandatory Emergency Board Meeting. Her blood ran cold. The attached memo began: "In light of CEO Sloane Davenport's erratic behavior and unauthorized use of company property and broken bar Kendrick, while she was fighting to keep the company alive, he had been preparing the knife." "How fast can this thing fly?" she whispered, panic breaking through her voice. Owen skimmed the message, then checked the fuel levels and the storm wall flying behind them. "Not fast enough," he said, his tone grim. "They aren't just firing you, they're setting a trap." "There's no way we make it back by 8, Sloane said, color draining from her face. "Even with a tailwind, we're at least 3 hours out. By the time we land, the vote will be over." "He'll have ya." Owen's eyes moved from the blinking red alert to the weather radar. A violent mass of storm clouds roared behind Amy, but along its southern edge ran a narrow, unstable wind corridor. A jet stream. Dangerous. Unpredictable. Like riding a wild animal through a hurricane. But it could cut their travel time in half. "There's one option," he said. "You're not going to like it." Sloane looked at the turbulent radar, then at the quiet certainty on his face. "I don't have to like it," she replied. "I just have to live through it." He nodded and swung the helicopter hard toward the storm's edge. The aircraft shuddered violently as it punched into the brutal currents, but Owen's grip stayed unshakable. They weren't fleeing the storm anymore, they were harnessing it. "He planned this," Sloane whispered over the engine's roar. "All of it." The bad advice on Tanaka, Gavin's son getting sick, every setback. "Kendrick." "Why?" Owen asked, eyes fixed on the windscreen. "My job," she said with a bitter laugh. "My father built this company from nothing. When he died, the board saw me as a placeholder, the legacy daughter. I spent 10 years proving them wrong. Kendrick was my first hire. I trusted him, and he's been waiting a year as to setting the stage, making me look unstable so he could swoop in as the calm, steady alternative." She sagged against her seat. "Maybe he's right. I flew into a storm with a man I barely know, chasing a deal he probably sabotaged himself. That is reckless." "It isn't reckless to fight for something you care about," Owen said quietly. The simple truth of it hit her like a punch. "Is that why you walked away?" she asked softly. "Because you cared too much?" Owen didn't answer right away. The helicopter carved through the dark, the engines waddling under the strain. "When I meet Sarah," he said at last, his voice low, "we were both Air Force pararescue. She was sharper, faster, braver than anyone I'd ever known. We worked as ONIA on missions and at home." He drew a slow breath. "Our last deployment a broken bar. We were sent after a downed medical chopper. Straightforward. In and out. But the intel was wrong. The valley wasn't empty. We followed every protocol. every rule, and it still didn't matter. His voice tightened. We lost 2 medics, and Sarah. She was hit helping the last man on board. She died before we cleared the ridge. The cockpit filled with the howl of wind. I held her hand. Owen whispered, and I realized that a broken bar you can do everything right and still lose everything. The system I believed in up, it couldn't save the one person I loved most, so I left. Took our daughter Maya, found a life where the worst consequence was a dirty floor. Sloane felt tears burning her eyes for him, for Sarah, for the hollow ache in his voice. Before she could speak, her tablet chimed. A weak signal flickered alive. It's from a board member, she said urgently. An old ally of my father's. He's asking for proof of Kendrick's sabotage, but I can't connect to the server. The signal's too weak. Owen's pilot instincts took control immediately. The signal can't break through all this storm interference, he said. Angle the tablet toward that comm satellite right there. He pointed to a small patch of sky barely visible through the turbulence. It's a long shot, but we might catch a bounce. Sloane adjusted the tablet. A file directory struggled to load, the most folders timing out up until one name caught Owen's attention. K_archive_inc. What's that? He asked. Kendrick's encrypted archive, Sloane replied. He said it was for backup copies of sensitive projects. Standard practice. It's not standard practice to lock a backup behind a triple layers encryption, Owen said, eyes narrowing. And that port he's running it through, it's a ghost port hidden from security sweeps. Sloane, that's not a backup folder. That's a dead drop. He's running a shadow network inside your own system. Sloane stared at him. Can you prove it? Not from the sky, he said, but I know what it is. We've found the weapon. Now we just need the ammunition. The eastern horizon was bleeding into a bruised purple when the city finally appeared ahead. They were going to make it back, but that wasn't the real battle anymore. It won't matter, Sloane whispered, exhaustion flattening her voice. We'll walk into that boardroom. I'll accuse him. He'll deny everything, and they'll think I've lost my mind. He's fooled all of them, and we have no proof. Owen's gaze locked on Davenport Tower, its holopad glowing like a beacon. The soldier he'd buried 8 years ago was fully awake now. You're right, he said sharply. The boardroom isn't the battlefield. It's the target. We're not walking in to defend ourselves, and we're going in to strike. The helicopter touched down with minutes to spare. As the rotors slowed, Owen was already unstrapping, already moving. He wasn't a janitor, or even a pilot now. He was what he'd once been trained to be, a tactician. They expect you defensive, he said, helping Sloane down. Cornered, emotional. You're going to give them exactly that. Sloane blinked at him. You want me to lose? No, he said. I want you to stall, fight, argue, question the numbers. Call Kendrick out if you have to. Keep every pair of eyes on you. You're the distraction. Can you do that? Sloane straightened, a spark of her old fire igniting. Yes, I can. Good. While you're holding their attention, I need 2 things: your master keycard and your admin network password. Without hesitation, she handed over the card and recited the long, complex passcode. No fear, only trust. What are you planning? She asked. Kendrick built himself a secret hiding place in your system, Owen said. I'm going to force him to burn it down with his own hands. He turned and disappeared down the stairwell. Moments later, Sloane stepped into the boardroom at the jaws of her own ambush. Cold silence greeted her. The board sat rigid, judgment already brewing. Kendrick hovered near the vice chairman, wearing the mask of reluctant there. Sloane, Arthur began, wasting no time. This meeting concerned several disturbing issues. Your handling of the Tanaka situation, and now this unauthorized flight, a broken bar. He shook his head. These actions point to instability. Kendrick slid into his performance like he'd rehearsed it. He presented altered emails, doctored projections, and the logs of her supposed reckless trip. I've always supported Sloane, he said solemnly, but my duty is to the company. Her behavior has become erratic. I fear she may no longer be fit to lead. Sloane unleashed every bit of outrage she had. She challenged projections, timelines, motives. She accused Kendrick of betrayal. Her fury filled the room just as Owen needed. 2 floors below, Owen swiped her keycard at the server room. The lock clicked green. Inside, Chilled air hummed around him. He found a terminal and his fingers flew, old reflexes snapping back to life. He didn't try to break Kendrick's encryption at too slow. He went for the ghost port. He found the hidden channel and wrote a short, brutal script, a recursive loop forcing a fraction of all outgoing network traffic through Kendrick's secretly encrypted folder. In minutes, the entire system would choke, and diagnostics would lead straight to the archive. Upstairs, Sloan was mid-retort when every screen in the room flickered red. Network integrity failure, a critical alarm shrieked. Tablets and laptops flashed in unison. What on earth is this? Arthur barked. Kendrick froze, confusion washing into horror. Another alert flashed. Source: partition K_archive_ and his private archive. His secret. How had they uncovered it? He panicked. If I run a deep diagnostic, I can fix this, he shouted, bolting upright. It's just a server glitch. I'll isolate it from my terminal. He fled the room. In the server room, Owen watched the monitor. Kendrick's login appeared. Then the flurry of panic commands. And finally, the one Owen was waiting for. Purge partition, K_archive_ and create. True. Kendrick was destroying the evidence. Owen let the command run, and as it executed, he launched his own program, a packet sniffer capturing every keystroke. A broken bar. Owen captured everything, every keystroke Kendrick entered, every packet of data he sent, every command he executed. Nothing escaped the recording. It logged Kendrick's credentials, the exact moment he accessed the system during a critical failure, and the irreversible purge order he issued to delete a concealed folder, a folder that should never have existed, and whose destruction under those circumstances crossed the line into federal criminal territory. When the purge finished, the alarms died. The network instantly recovered, free of the bottleneck Kendrick himself had created. Owen stored the recording in a locked, encrypted file, a hard, grim satisfaction settling over him. Whatever Sloan was dealing with upstairs no longer mattered. He had proof. A few minutes later, Kendrick returned to the boardroom, patting sweat from his forehead as if he'd just saved the company from disaster. My apologies for the interruption, he announced smoothly. It turns out an old data packet was looping through the network. I've isolated it and cleared it out. Everything is stable again. He flashed Sloan a smug, superior smile. As I was saying, this company needs stable leadership, as someone who doesn't unravel the moment pressure hits. Arthur nodded solemnly. Thank you for handling that, Kendrick. If no one has anything further, I propose we move to a vote. He never finished the sentence. The double doors swung open. Owen Grant stepped inside. He wore no janitor's uniform, no badge of position, just a battered leather jacket and a steady, unshakable presence. The room fell silent as he walked directly past the board members, eyes fixed on Kendrick. Kendrick's expression collapsed into shock. Owen stopped at the head of the table, placed Sloan's tablet in front of Arthur, and spoke with quiet certainty. That corrupted data packet? He said. It wasn't corrupted. It had a name. He touched the screen. The recording began to play. The massive monitor that moments ago had showcased Kendrick's polished charts and falsified projections now displayed cold, unforgiving evidence. The board watched, stunned, as Kendrick Shaw's log-in credentials filled the screen. They watched the timestamp confirm he was logged in from his office while pretending to be present in the meeting, and they watched the fatal command appear, purge partition K_archive_ and create. True. Sloan rose to her feet. As you can see, she said, her voice sharp and unflinching, Mr. Shaw accessed an unauthorized hidden archive on our server set, an archive he created and permanently erased it while this board was in session. She paused, letting the full implication settle like a stone. That archive contained every piece of correspondence between him and executives inside Tinaco Corporation. He just destroyed the record of his own espionage. Kendrick's face drained of all color. That's a lie, he screamed, his voice cracking under the weight of panic. He's a hacker. She brought in some hacker. That man is a janitor. He faked the footage. He's nothing and nothing. You can't believe him over me. The wild desperation in his voice did more damage to him than the recording ever could. Silence choked the room. Arthur looked from Kendrick's frantic outbursts to Owen's calm, steady stance. His decision was immediate. Security, he said into the intercom. To the boardroom. 2 uniformed guards marched in. Kendrick looked around in disbelief. but there was nowhere left to turn, no allies, no exit. He had never even considered the quiet man pushing a cleaning cart might be the one to bring him down. As the guards escorted him out, his shrill protests echoed through the hall. "She's unstable. You're all making a mistake." His voice faded. Arthur turned back to Sloane, the hard judgment in his eyes replaced by something humbled and sincere. "Sloane," he said quietly, "on behalf of the entire board of Broken Bar, you have our deepest apologies. We were wrong." "Thank you, Arthur," she replied. Then he faced Owen. "And you, Mr. Grant of Broken Bar, I don't know how we could ever repay the debt we owe you." Owen's expression didn't change. "Just taking out the trash, sir." When the board members finally left, each offering Sloane their own quiet apology, as only she and Owen remained, sunlight spilled across the room, highlighting drifting dust motes as the tense chaos of the last day melted into calm. It was over. It won. Sloane studied him. I really studied him, not as a contractor, or a soldier, or the man who mopped the floors, but as someone who had stood at her side through every fire. "So," she said softly, a tired half-smile forming. "What now, contractor?" A faint smile touched his lips, a small, honest, the first she'd ever truly seen. "I think my contract's up, ma'am." "Sloane," she corrected gently. "My name is Sloane." "Owen," he replied. The titles between them dissolved, burned away by the storm they'd survived. What remained were two people standing in the quiet. After a war, caught in the unspoken question of what came next. A week later, Davenport Industries hummed with renewed purpose. The fear that once lingered in the halls had vanished, replaced with excited murmurs. Everyone knew the story. The janitor who saved the company. It had grown into legend. Kendrick was gone, buried under a mountain of criminal charges. The Tanaka partnership was being restructured fairly. Sloane's leadership was sharper, clearer than ever. But Sloane felt no victory. Because Owen Grant had disappeared. He'd resigned with a curt, professional email the morning after the meeting. He never collected his final paycheck. He ignored the single text she'd sent. "Are you okay?" The contract was over. He'd upheld every word. And he was gone. She found herself listening for the familiar squeak of his cart, expecting him in the hallways. Everywhere she went felt emptier now, her own company cold and distant again. She had regained everything, except the one person who had made her feel she wasn't alone in it. Only then did she realize, the problem had never been Kendrick alone. The real flaw was a culture she herself had allowed so focused upward that it never looked at the people holding the place together. So she made a choice. She called a company-wide meeting. In the Grand Hall, thousands of employees watched her, expecting the ruthless, untouchable CEO they knew. But she was different. Softer, yet stronger. "For the last 10 years, she began, her voice steady, "I measured the success of this company by stock prices and market share. I was wrong. A company isn't a balance sheet. A company is its people." She told them about the man in their midst, extraordinarily skilled, yet invisible because no one had looked beyond his uniform. "How many more like him are here?" she asked, her gaze sweeping the crowd. "Artists, engineers, pilots, poets, hidden talents, ignored because we never asked." That ends today. Announcing the creation of the Department of Human Potential, she revealed its mission: to discover and nurture the skills of every employee, providing education, training, and opportunities for growth. At Davenport Industries, no one would ever be invisible again. There was only one person who could lead it. She found him on a quiet Saturday, in a small park a dozen blocks from his apartment. Kneeling in the sandbox, he helped Maya perfect the towers of an intricate sandcastle. He looked up, cautious. "Miss Davenport," he said flatly. "Sloane," she corrected gently. "You're hard to find." "Owen." "I'm not trying to be found," he replied. "I know," she said, "but I need your help." She shared her vision of a company that truly valued its people and offered him the role to lead the new department. He brushed sand from his jeans, shaking his head. "I'm not a manager, Sloane. I'm nobody." "You're not nobody," she said fiercely. "You saved this company. You see what others miss. Your old job got people killed. Now, I'm offering you a mission that brings people to life." He hesitated, weighed down by the shadows of his past. Then Maya tugged on his sleeve. "Daddy," she said, simple and certain, "you fixed the helicopter, And you fixed the sad lady's company. You're good at fixing things. Owen looked at his daughter's trusting face, then at Sloane, whose eyes held raw hope. Perhaps a mission didn't always require a flight suit or an enemy. Sometimes, a mission was about building, not destroying. A slow, genuine smile spread across his face. "Okay," he said, "I'll do it." 6 months later, the rooftop of Davenport Tower glowed under the setting sun. Owen stood by the railing, no longer a janitor but the celebrated director of human potential. His department had already transformed the company, promoting dozens from within, including a former mailroom clerk now thriving in graphic design. Sloane joined him, Maya holding both their hands. "It's beautiful up here," she said softly. "It is," Owen agreed. She smiled, playful light in her eyes. "You know, a broken bar after all this, I think I still owe you something." Confused, he asked, "You don't owe me anything, Sloane." "I think I do," she said warmly. "I'm pretty sure I said if you could fly that helicopter, I'd marry you." Owen laughed, deep and true, echoing across the rooftop. He squeezed her hand, eyes meeting hers. What began as a reckless bet had grown into a promise. Together, they had both been rescued up the pilot who had forgotten how to fly, and the CEO who had forgotten how to live. They had found the one thing missing in their lives, a safe place to land. "Where in the world are you watching this from?" she asked the audience. Drop a comment and let us know. Your presence here matters. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that hidden talents could be discovered in everyone, please consider subscribing. Many more stories are waiting. Thank you for spending your time with us. Until next time, stay brave, stay kind, and always look past the uniform.